Chapter 5 At Mimir's Well. Really, truly, with all of his heart, Odd found that he wanted to believe that he was still in the world he'd known all his life, that he was still in the country of the Norse folk, and that he was in Midgard. Only he wasn't, and he knew it. The world smelled different for a start. It smelled alive. Everything he looked at looked sharper, more real, more there. And if there was any doubt, then he only had to look at the animals. "You've got bigger," he told them. "You've grown." And they had. The fox's ears were now level with Odd's chest. The eagle's wingspan, when it preened in the sunshine, was as wide as a longboat's huge sail. The bear, which had not been small to begin with, was now the size of Odd's father's hut, enormous in its bulk and its bearishness. "We didn't grow," said the fox, its fur the vivid orange colour of a blazing fire. "This is how big we are. We are normal-sized." Odd nodded, and then he said, "So the whole place is called Asgard, and the town we have to go to is also called Asgard, yes?"
"We named it after ourselves," said the bear. "After the Aesir."
"How far is it to your place?" The fox sniffed the air and then looked around them. There were mountains behind them, and the forest all around them. "A day's travel, maybe a little more. Once we get through the forest, we'll reach the plain, and the city is in the centre of the plain." Odd nodded. "I suppose we should get on with it then."
"There will be time," said the bear. "Asgard's not going anywhere, and if right now I am hungry, I am going fishing. Why don't you two build a fire?"
And without waiting to see what would happen, the great beast lumbered off into the darkness of the forest. The eagle flapped its wings, loud as a small thunderclap, and it took off, circling higher and higher, and then followed the bear. Odd and the fox gathered wood, finding dry twigs and dry dead branches, and gathering together, and then Odd heaped them high. He took out his knife and sliced a point on a hard stick, then put the point against a piece of dry softwood, preparing to rotate the stick between his hands, to use friction to make a fire. The fox eyed him, unimpressed. "Why bother?" it said. "It's easier." He put its muzzle against the heap of wood and breathed on the twigs. The air above the twigs wavered, then shimmered, and then, with a crackle, the sticks caught fire. "How did you do that?" "This is Asgard," said the fox. "It's less solid than the place you come from. The gods, even transformed gods, well, there is power in this place. You understand?" "Not really, but not to worry." Odd sat beside the fire, and he waited for the bear and the eagle to return. While he waited, he took out a piece of wood his father had started to carve. He inspected it, puzzled over the shape, familiar yet strange, wondering what it had been intended to be, and why it should bother him so. He ran his thumb over it, and it comforted him. It was twilight by the time the bear brought back the largest trout Odd had ever seen. The boy gutted it with his knife. The fox devoured the raw guts enthusiastically. Then he speared it through with a long stick, cut 2 forked sticks to make an improvised spit, and then he roasted it over a fire, turning it every few minutes to ensure it did not burn. When the fish was cooked, the eagle took the head, and the other 3 divided the meat between them, the bear eating more than the other 2 put together. The twilight edged imperceptibly into night, and a huge, dark, yellow moon began to rise on the horizon, achingly slowly. When they had finished eating, the fox went to sleep beside the fire, and the eagle flapped heavily off into a dead pine to sleep. Odd took the leftover fish and pushed it into a drift of snow to keep it fresh, as his mother had taught him. The bear looked at Odd, then it said casually,
"You must be thirsty. Come on, let's look for some water."
Odd climbed onto the bear's broad back and held tight as it lumbered off into the darkness of the forest. It didn't feel like they were looking for anything, though. It felt like the bear knew exactly where he was going. The that he was heading somewhere, up a ridge and down into a small gorge, and through a copse of trees, magical in its stillness, and then they were pushing through a scratchy gorse, and now they were in a small clearing, in the centre of which was a pool of liquid water.
"Careful," said the bear quietly. "It goes down a long way."
Odd stared. The yellow moonlight was deceptive, but still. "There are shapes moving in the water," he said.
"Nothing there that will hurt you," said the bear. "They're just reflections, really. It's safe to drink. I give you my word."
Odd untied his wooden cup from his belt. He dipped it into the water and he drank. The water was refreshing and strangely sweet. He had not realised how thirsty he had been, and he filled his empty wooden cup 4 times. And then he yawned. "Oh, I feel so sleepy."
"It's all the travelling," said the bear. "Here, let me."
It pulled over several fallen fir branches at the edge of the clearing with its teeth.
"Curl up on these."
"But the others," said Odd.
"I'll tell them you fell asleep in the woods," said the bear. "Just don't go wandering off. For now, just rest."
And the bear lay down on the branches, crushing them under its bulk. The boy lay beside the animal, smelling the deep bearish scent of it, pushing against the fur and feeling the softness and the warmth. The world was comfortable and quiet and warm. He was safe, and everything was entered by the dark. When he opened his eyes once more, he was cold, and he was alone, and the moon was huge and white and high in the sky. More than twice as big as the moon in Midgard, thought Odd, and he wondered if that was because Asgard was closer to the moon, or whether it had its own moon. The bear was gone. In the pale moonlight, Odd could see shapes moving in the water of the pool, and he pulled himself to his feet and limped over to look more closely. At the water's edge he crouched down and made a cup from his hand and drank from it. The water was icy cold, but as he drank he felt warmed and safe and comfortable. The figures in the water dissolved and reformed. "What do you see?" asked a voice from behind Odd. Odd said nothing. "You have drunk from my spring," said the voice. "Did I do something wrong?" asked Odd. There was silence. Then, "No," said the voice. It sounded very old, so ancient he could not tell if it was a man's voice or a woman's. Then it said, "Look." In the water's surface he saw reflections. His father in the winter, playing with him and his mother. A silly game of blind man's buff that left them all giggling and helpless on the ground. He saw a huge creature with icicles in its beard, and hair like the pattern the frost makes on the leaves and on the ice early in the morning, sitting beside a huge wall, scanning the horizon restlessly. He saw his mother sitting in a corner of a great hall, sewing up Fat Alfred's worn jacket, and her eyes were red with tears. He saw the cold plains where the frost giants live, saw frost giants hauling rocks and feasting on great horned elk, and dancing beneath the moon. He saw his father sitting in the woodcutter's cottage he had so recently left himself. His father had a knife in one hand, a lump of wood in the other. He began to carve, a strange, distant smile on his face. Odd knew that smile. He saw his father as a young man, leaping from the longship into the sea and running up a craggy beach. Odd knew that this was Scotland, that soon his father would meet his mother. He kept watching. The moonlight was so bright in that place. Odd could see what he needed to. After some time he pulled out a lump of wood he had found in his father's hut and his knife, and he began to carve, in smooth, confident strokes, removing everything that wasn't part of the carving. He carved until daybreak, when the bear crunched through the trees into the clearing. It did not ask what Odd had seen in the pool, and Odd did not volunteer anything. Odd climbed onto the bear's back. "You're getting smaller again," said Odd. It was no longer the huge bear of the previous evening. Now it seemed only slightly bigger than it had been the first time Odd had seen it. "You've shrunk."
No, I'm the same size I was last night, said the bear. But you have drunk from Mimir's well, and you cannot expect to do that and stay unchanged.
Where do frost giants come from? Asked Odd, as they bounded through the forest.
Jotunheim, said the bear. It means giant's home. It is across the great river. Mostly they stay on their own side, but they've crossed before. One time, one of them wanted the sun, the moon, and Lady Freya. The time before that, they wanted my hammer Mjolnir, and the hand of Lady Freya. There was one time they wanted all the treasures of Asgard, and Lady Freya.
They must like Lady Freya a lot, said Odd.
They do. She's very pretty.
What's it like in Jotunheim? Asked Odd.
Bleak, treeless, cold, desolate. Nothing like it is here. You should ask Loki.
Why?
He wasn't always one of the Aesir. He was born a frost giant. He was the smallest frost giant ever. They used to laugh at him, so he left. Saved Odin's life on his travels. And he...
The bear hesitated, and he seemed to think twice about whatever he had been about to say, and finished,
He keeps things interesting.
And then the bear said,
Anything that you did last night, anything you saw...
Yes?
The wise man knows when to keep silent. Only the fool tells all he knows.
The fox and the eagle were waiting beside the remains of the fire. Odd finished what was left of the fish. Then the bear said,
Well, what do we do now?
Odd said, Take me to the edge of the forest. You wait for me. I'll walk alone from there to the gates of Asgard. Why? Asked the fox. Because I don't want the frost giants knowing you three are back, said Odd. Not yet. They set off. I could get very used to travelling by bear, Odd said, but the bear only grunted.